Heavenly Father, as we begin this study this morning, we ask for the presence of your Holy Spirit to give us discernment, to recognize anything that needs to be fine-tuned or understood as truth that's overruled things that we've been understanding in the past, or error that must not be received. We want to go through this and study this paper, and we ask that your Holy Spirit would open up the portions of it that are latter rain for our hearts and our minds to receive, if that be your will. Bless our efforts now, in Jesus' name. Amen. This paper is so long, and I read it when we first got it, way back when. I've read it a couple times. And I handed it out to a couple other people. Tyler I handed it out to, and he mentioned when we came in this morning he should have brought his copy because he already had some areas marked where he had question marks. What I'm saying is we'll go through this slow because it's going to challenge some things that we've been teaching here for a while about the first few verses of Daniel 11. But it seems pretty sound, and it also, if we're going to get the full scope of what we read yesterday, this is the background for that study that we did yesterday. So we'll just take it one paragraph at a time and work through it. Daniel 8 in the realm of Grecia. Introduction. It is the purpose of this document to set forth prophetic arguments which may prove that the realm of Grecia, which the fourth kingdom of Persia, Donald James Trump, stirs up all against in Daniel 11, is not the United Nations, but Russia. It will also bring to view arguments from Daniel 8 to support this submission. If the contentions of this document are correct, this may shed more light on the history leading up to midnight and the message to go forth to Seventh-day Adventism before that waymark concerning the events that lead us to the close of our probation. The compiler intends that this document be as brief as possible. Therefore, there will not be much labor on the points that may already be considered as established beyond doubt in our consideration of Daniel 11. Sister Kathy?
Daniel 11, 1 through 4, the final President of the United States. The line of Daniel 11, 1 through 4 furnishes God's people with the primary argument for upholding the premise that the current United States President is the final President of the United States, and that he is therefore the President who is to usher in the long-awaited Sunday law crisis. The anchor point for this premise is the understanding that the third year of Cyrus, in which Daniel receives the vision of Daniel 11, is a type of the time of the end in 1989. Below is quoted the central verse to this application, followed by the manner in which we have applied it. And now I will show thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the fourth shall be far richer than they all. And by his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia. Daniel 11:2.
Keep going, Kathy. It's the same paragraph.
It is an established truth that the two-horned kingdom of Medo-Persia is a symbol of the two-horned kingdom of the United States at the end of the world. Cyrus, who was on the throne at the waymark, which typifies the time of the end, would accordingly symbolize George Herbert Walker Bush, who was the President of the United States in 1989. The 3 that would follow were Bill Clinton, George Walker Bush, and Barack Obama. The fourth is Donald James Trump, who according to the prophecy is to be far richer than they all. Perhaps in personal wealth, but more accurately in the global economic control the Trump administration will yield. In the initial understanding of his role as highlighted in Daniel 11:2, if my memory serves me right, it has been stated that he is going to wake up all against the realm of Grecia, which conventionally would be the United Nations at the end of the world. But the compiler will suggest that the realm of Grecia referred to in this verse is a different Grecia from that mentioned in verse 3 and 4 of Daniel 11, and therefore is not a symbol of the United Nations. To this point, the compiler will begin by delineating the history of Daniel 11:2 as identified by the pioneers.
So what's he doing there? He's making a distinction between the realm of Grecia in verse 2 and verse 3 and 4. He's going to try to uphold that distinction.
Daniel 11:2, Testimony of the Pioneers. The pioneers of Adventism, some of whom may not have been pioneers in the strictest sense of the word.
What does he mean by that, just so we all know? Because it really doesn't have anything to do with this, but you might as well understand what he means by that.
They're not from the 1840, 1844 time period.
Technically, a pioneer is someone that was in the Millerite movement. A lot of times they'll say Jones and Wagner were pioneers, but they weren't pioneers. They came years after the Millerite movement. Okay.
So those who were under the first and the second angel's message.
Yes.
Touched in some detail on the Greco-Persian tensions which led to Xerxes' ambitious and military campaign against the realm of Grecia. Josiah Litch identifies the fact that Xerxes' work in stirring up all was not limited to rallying those within his own nation, but was an extensive military
Consolidation.
thank you, based upon agreements and alliances with subordinate states to the Persian Empire.
Who's Xerxes? Esther's husband, Ahasuerus. Okay, so just so we know that.
Xerxes' expedition into Greece is one of the most memorable adventures in ancient history. Herodias affirms that Xerxes, in raising his army, searched every place of the continent, and it was the greatest army that was brought into the
Ever brought.
and it was the greatest army that ever was brought into the field. For what nation was there, says he, that Xerxes let out of Asia into Greece? Herodias lived in that age, and he recounts with great exactness the various nations of which Xerxes' army was composed, and computes that the whole number of horse and foot by land and sea out of Asia and out of Europe, soldiers and followers of the camp, amounted to 5,283,220 men. Nor was Xerxes content with stirring up the east, but was for stirring up the west likewise, and engaged the
Carthaginians.
Carthaginians, thank you, in his alliance, that while he with his army overwhelmed Greece, they might fall upon the Greek colonies in Sicily and Italy. And the Carthaginians, for this purpose, was not only raised all the forces that could in Africa, but also hired a great number of mercenaries in Spain and Gaul and Italy, so that their army consisted of 300,000 men and their fleet of 200 ships. Thus did Xerxes stir up against the realm of Grecia, and after him no mention is made of any other king of Persia. It is to be noted, saith Jerome, that the prophet, having enumerated 4 kings of the Persians after Cyrus, slippeth over 9, and passeth to Alexander, for the prophetic spirit did not care to follow the order of history, but only to touch upon the most famous events. Xerxes was the principal author of the long wars and enervated hatred between the Grecians and Persians, and as he was the last king of Persia who invaded Greece, he is mentioned last. The Grecians then, in their turn, invaded Asia, and Xerxes' expedition being the most memorable on one side, as Alexander was on the other. The reign of these two are not improperly connected together.
So when we were studying Esther, what did we come to conclude about Ahasuerus' or Xerxes' feast?
It was given right prior for him going to this war.
Yeah, but how long was it? 6 months?
180 days.
And all the provinces were brought in? So that's addressing his preparation for this attack against Greece. Tanya? So this was the biggest army ever brought into the field. I don't know if it's been passed up in history since then, but that's a lot of people. 5 million, 6 million people.
And the naval ships were not accounted for.
A.T. Jones then informed us that this work of consolidation was accomplished during the time of the 6 months or 180-day feast identified in Esther 1, and that it involved the redistribution of finances, levying of tribute, to ensure the successful invasion and subjugation of the Grecian states. He further notes that this was war effort ended in a humiliating defeat for the Persians. In Daniel 11:2 is a prophecy spoken in the 3rd year of Cyrus, BC 534, saying, Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than they all. And by his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia. It was in fulfillment of this prophecy that Xerxes invaded Greece BC 480 with the largest army ever known, when in resisting it, the 300 Spartans under Leonidas immortalized themselves at Thermopylae. Thermopylae. It was in preparation for this invasion of Greece that he gathered all the princes and governors of his empire to Susa, as recorded in Esther 1:3-9. In the 3rd year of his reign, he made a feast unto all his princes and his servants, the power of Persia and Media, the nobles and princes of the provinces being before him. He called the governors and princes of the provinces to his capital to deliberate upon the invasion of Greece, and to levy the tribute and the forces that should be furnished by each province for the purpose. The royal entertainment continued 6 months, but it was no later than the 7th day of the feast when the king in his drunkenness commanded his chamberlains to bring Vashti, the queen, before the king with the crown royal, to show the people and the princess her beauty. But the queen Vashti refused to come. Then the king in the council decided to put her away and to publish a decree in the language for every people, that every man should bear rule in his own house. Then in his 6th year he led his army into Greece, suffered a terrible defeat at Salamis and at Plataea, and this Sennacherib of old returned with shame of face into his own land.
And like Sennacherib.
And like Sennacherib of old, returned with shame of face into his own land. And there he for the rest of his days sought to occupy himself in the exercise of arms of a very different nature from those with which he had been occupied in the invasion of Greece. Then he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what was decreed against her. It would seem that he remembered Vashti with the wish to call her to his side again. But the decree of the Persians and Medes had been published against her, and it was impossible to alter or reverse that. So he was compelled to do without Vashti and seek another in her place, and the choice fell upon Esther, the adopted daughter of her cousin Mordecai. And the king loved Esther above all the women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown upon her and made her queen instead of Vashti.
A.T. Jones, Signs of the Times, Volume 12, page 138. Kathy? You want to read, Jack? Kathy?
These facts become important for an in-time application of the symbolism of Daniel 11:2, and for the truths which lie hidden under the surface of the verse. These truths are unearthed by a careful consideration of the history associated with the verses. It is already an established truth in this message that Donald Trump is the antitype of Xerxes the Great, and his unique mode of political operations has also recently been brought to view and typified by that of Xerxes. That of gaining ascendancy over nations through treaties, alliances, and economic inducements, see Daniel 11:23 and 24. If the compiler has been understanding the recent discussions on this latter subject correctly, emphasis on the activity of Trump's political model has been placed in the history between midnight and the midnight cry. This the compiler does not agree with.
Disagree.
This the compiler does not disagree with, but suggests that there is also much implementation of this political model before midnight, which has not been denied in the discussions. Significant enough to deserve special attention. It is a progressive work, as was that of Xerxes in the time of the 6-month feast. A symbol we typically apply to the history of 9/11 to the midnight cry. This foregoing point may as well be one of the punchlines of this document. Below is the line summarizing the historical understanding of Daniel 11, 1 through 4, with a suggested prophetic counterpart below.
So, I don't know if I should draw this up for the web or not at this point, or read on. Okay. Do the bullet points. What's that mean?
You could put the numbers, yeah.
Well, you don't need dates. I just do
Oh, I was
Bush,
gonna
Clinton,
say-
Bush, Obama, Trump, and then, that last little bit.
Bush, Clinton, Bush to Obama,
Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump,
Trump.
space.
480.
Should we continue to read while you do that?
I want to be engaged is the only thing.
Do you want one of us to do that? Just to copy it?
No, I'll get it. Who's reading? You going to read more, Kathy? Or you going to?
No, he didn't indent. They're all paragraphs. He didn't indent to show new paragraphs, so when he skips.
We're not worrying about what he did.
I'm just saying, no. I
We can read a
my
couple
paragraph.
each or a few each, whatever we got personal strength to do. You want to read another one or not? Okay, Cheryl, Tyler.
We're on the next page?
Yeah, we're on the next page. And maybe there will come up, I'm assuming, don't remember right now, that he's going to go through this history that's in this line in the next few paragraphs. And once we get to a point where we can go back to the line and have his full logic of it, then we'll go back to this line. So Cheryl or Tyler, read on.
The above suggested prophetic model may be slightly different from the one commonly understood in this movement, but the compiler will attempt to explain and justify the minor adjustments. It is understood in this movement that Daniel 11, 1 through 4 is a history which typifies the prophetic history of 1989 to the Sunday Law. Therefore, Daniel 11, 1 through 4 is a line of prophecy which sheds clear light on the history of Daniel 11:40, a history which concludes with the fulfillment of Daniel 11:41 at the Sunday Law in the United States. It is a truth which is in line with the unsealing of the seventh seal, for this is new light on the message of the hour. Daniel 11:40-45. The compiler will not labor to explain the portion on the above prophetic model concerning the 4 kings and 4 presidents, 536 to 485 BC and 1989 to 2017, for that is established beyond question. The explanations will be on the portions following the aforementioned.
So what I'm putting up here, he's not going to deal with this part, but he's going to deal with this, is what he's saying at this point. He's not going to labor on it, he says.
Sometime after Xerxes ascended the throne of the Persian Empire, he began extensive military and economic consolidation for the purpose of invading and subjugating the Grecian states. The reasons for this invasion of Greece is not apparent in the verses of Daniel 11. One would need to get into the history to discover the background of the Grecian-Persian wars. Xerxes' campaign against the Greeks was but the climax of a conflict which had begun in the times of his predecessor Darius Hystaspes. In 522, Darius came to power and set about consolidating and strengthening the Persian Empire. In 500 BCE, the Greek city-states on the western coast of Anatolia rose up in rebellion against Persia. This uprising, known as the Ionian Revolt, 500 to 494, failed, but its consequences for the mainland Greeks were momentous. Athens and Eritrea had sent a small fleet in support of the revolt, which Darius took as a pretext for launching an invasion of the Greek mainland.
The roots of the Ionian Revolt bore fruit in Xerxes' ambitious expedition against the weaker Grecian forces. This becomes an important point for future contentions in this document. Xerxes waged war with Grecia, bringing to aid a multitude of great forces. Their first engagement was at the Battle of Thermopylae in August 480 BC, which was not sufficient to conclude the war between the two forces, but saw Persia very fortunately in the ascendancy. A few weeks later, the two armies were again in conflict at the Battle of Salamis.
These are these two-way marks here that he's reading about right here. Here's the one it was a stalemate he has in his notes. Undecided, but now he's getting ready to tell us about this battle here.
Which resulted in an unexpected victory for the Greek states. Grecia then sealed their victory over the Persians in the next year, 479 BC, at the Battle of Plateau. The prophecy of Daniel 11 then skips over 9 Persian kings to note the rise of the Grecian Empire under Alexander the Great in 332 BC. The compiler suggests that there is a prophetic reason for this besides that which is directly noted in the Scripture of Truth.
Josiah Litch, Uriah Smith, and some historians mark that 9 kings followed Xerxes the Great. This would make Alexander the Great the 10th in the sequence. Some say that Alexander the Great was anointed as king of Medo-Persia by its last king, Darius III, before he became king of the Grecian Empire. Thus, the number 10 can be marked historically between Xerxes the Great and Alexander the Great, and perhaps the truth that Trump is first the President of the United States before becoming a leader of the United Nations. But in the list of the 9 kings set forth by some historians, Artabanus is left out, probably because he illegally usurped the Persian throne and was regent of the empire for only 7 months. We include him in the list of Persian kings in this message because of the line of the 7 thunders illustrates by the first 7 kings of Persia, and he is not a casual addition to the prophetic line. For his characteristics and his actions shed light in the event thunders, which confirms the truths of this message. However, this is beyond the scope of this document. The point is that if Artabanus is added to the list of Persian kings, then there can be seen 10 Persian kings between Xerxes the Great and Alexander the Great, which still upholds the number 10 as a symbol of that history. This fact may contribute light to what leads up to Trump's assumption of United Nations leader. Alexander's rise was progressive but rapid. It took him only 10 years to establish a universal empire, a kingdom which would bear rule over all the earth. See Daniel 2:39. Thus we see another symbol of the number 10. Having established this kingdom, he died suddenly of a drunken stupor, and his kingdom was divided and racked with eternal strife. Furthermore, Daniel 11 states that his kingdom would be plucked up.
So he's got a number 10 in here, which are these 10 Persian kings, because he's including Artabanus, even though the historians don't include Artabanus, but we know he belongs there because of the 7 thunders. And then he's using a number 10 in here because Alexander reigns for 10 years before he dies.
Where's United Nations at?
The United Nations is going to be right here, but this is where the United Nations is rising up. This is the midnight cry between, this is the, what is it, the parallel kingdoms. 6th kingdom going down, 7th kingdom coming up. So you're seeing the 10 here, okay?
So I'm assuming that this guy that was taken out, he's part of the first 7, that's why he's including him?
You're assuming what?
The Artabanus, he's part of the first 7 kings of Persia. That's why he's including him, to make sure that the 7th
No,
thunder.
he's saying that when the prophecy mentions Xerxes, and the next historical figure the prophecy mentions is Alexander the Great, that actually in history there was 9 other Persian kings that followed Xerxes before Alexander comes into history. And the historians will tell you there was 9 after Xerxes before Alexander. But the historians don't include Artabanus, but we include Artabanus because we've already established him in the 7 thunders. That's a different line. So we know that he belongs there, even though the historians don't. So he's saying because we've established Artabanus as one of those kings between Xerxes and Alexander the Great, that we can identify 10 there. All right, so that's this 10. And then this is 10 years of Alexander the Great till he drinks himself to death. Yes? Am I right? Mm-hmm. Okay.
The compiler suggests that as the rise of Alexander's Greece was progressive yet rapid, so the standing up of a Donald Trump as the leader of the United Nations, the mighty king, is the same. For the final movements will be rapid ones, but they will still be progressive. It begins at the midnight cry and is consummated at the Sunday law, when, like Alexander the Great, Trump will have very rapidly established a kingdom which shall bear rule over all the earth, a one world government. But once that government is firmly established at the Sunday law, Trump's kingdom, the United States, will be broken, divided, and plucked up, a symbol of the national ruin that is to hit the United States. This understanding of a progressive rise of the Grecian Empire also confirms our understanding of the parallel empires. Alexander's Greece marked the establishment of a new Grecian order. Likewise, Trump's rise to the leadership of the United Nations will be the beginning of a new world order. Historically, the Grecia of Daniel 11:2 was a different Grecia from the one established by Alexander. Therefore, the compiler suggests that the Grecia that the 4th king, Trump, comes against before his rise to the leadership of the United Nations is different from the Grecia which is the United Nations. And also that Donald Trump will unexpectedly sustain a major loss against whatever power is represented by Grecia, as it was between Xerxes and the realm of Grecia. The Grecian forces which Xerxes came against was led by Themistocles. Themistocles means glory of the law, and Xerxes means ruler over heroes, or hero among the rulers. And the compiler suggests that the Grecia, which defeats the modern Persian Empire, the USA, will by its victory cause the glory of the law, the Constitution, in the United States to be extinguished, and thus furnish grounds for Donald Trump to be elevated to the position of hero among the rulers, leader of the United Nations, in order to deal with the unexpected global crisis.
Okay, so that looks like a paragraph, at least for me, that we need to read one more time. I think I follow the logic, but I can't hold it in my head all. So, someone want to walk me through that? Alexander's Greece marked the establishment of a new Grecian order. So he's placing that right here, right?
Progressively.
Yeah.
Or is he placing it here? New Grecian order begins. That's his line. Okay.
That's there.
Okay. Trump's rise to the leadership will be beginning of the new world order. Okay. The seventh kingdom is coming up. The sixth kingdom is going down. But Trump is riding both of those. He's riding the sixth going down, but he's also riding the seventh coming up. Historically, Greece of Daniel 11:2 was different, a different Grecia from the one established by Alexander. Why is that? No one knows.
I think he's saying that one is a world empire and one is this mainland Greece.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what he's saying, but because I don't think he's said it yet what the difference is, but he's saying.
Okay, let's put a question mark on that, because we will have to defend that at some point in time, I guarantee. Okay, therefore the compiler suggests that Grecia, the fourth King Trump comes against before his rise to the leadership of the United Nations is different from the Grecia which is the United Nations. Okay, so he's just making a distinction between Russia and the United Nations. He's making an argument for that, but he's saying historically it was that same, and you're saying it's because he came against Greece when it was just a nation, but Alexander the Great is going to make it the kingdom of the world. Okay.
I guess that's what he's saying.
All right, that may be what he's saying. And also Donald Trump will unexpectedly sustain a major loss against whatever power is represented by Grecia, as it was between Xerxes and the realm of Grecia. The Grecian forces which Xerxes came against were led by, how do you say that?
Themistocles.
Are you sure? Themistocles, all right. The glory of the law.
It's Themistocles.
I think you're right.
And the compiler said Grecia, which defeats modern Persia, will by its cause the glory of the law. So he's saying right here, right? He's not saying it over here. Or is he saying it over here?
I think he's saying it at midnight. That Donald Trump will unexpectedly sustain a major loss. That would be
No, but the point is go back to his chart. He's got Greece winning here. For us, we've been saying this is Panium and Russia loses at Panium. Russia wins, that's what you're saying, at Raphia. Okay? This isn't on his chart here, but we're understanding by the waymarks that this is Raphia and this is Panium. Right? No, you're right. Okay, all right. All right.
Yeah, don't do that.
If I may,
Eraser.
All right.
Okay.
there were 3 battles that were had between the Grecians and Xerxes' army. And those 3 battles led to Greece winning at 479 BC, September of
This
that.
is the 3 battles.
That's one.
Thermopylae, and then 2 here, a doubling here, Salamis and Plataeus. And that would then lead to Panium here. So what are you saying?
I'm just saying that one is where Greece's victory is confirmed, which is a type of raphia.
Okay. So what were we looking at? The Grecians were the glory of the law.
Unexpected law.
So that's here. Okay, so this is the glory of the laws getting overturned here at Raphia. Right? And then the next waymark would be where Donald Trump becomes the hero among the rulers at Paneum. Is everyone agreeing with me or disagreeing with me or not following me? He's placing the name, the glory of the law here at Raphia. This is the first major strike against the law. And then over here, the hero of among rulers.
Mighty kings
Yeah. Yes? Ready to move on? Okay, next paragraph.
There are two symbols of 10 following one another in the history of Daniel 11, verses 1 through to 4. The first being 10 kings after Xerxes, leading up to Alexander's Grecia, and the next being the 10 years of the establishment for a new Grecian order under the rule of Alexander the Great. The compiler suggests that the mighty king begins to stand up at the midnight cry, and that 10 symbolic years later, his new order of government, the seventh kingdom of Bible prophecy, is firmly established at the Sunday law. Already we can mark the number 10 from the midnight cry to the Sunday law. Example, Nabal's 10 days in a coma, 10 days to Pentecost in the upper room, etc. And the compiler suggests that the 10 represented by the 10 kings preceding Alexander's rise brings us back from the midnight cry, Alexander's rise, to the waymark of midnight. This is because midnight to the midnight cry and the midnight cry to the Sunday law can structurally be shown to possess similar characteristics, but also because before these 10 Persian kings came into history, Xerxes was unexpectedly defeated by a weaker power. This is similar to the Battle of Raphia, where the king of the north, the United States, is unexpectedly defeated by the king of the south, Russia. Accordingly, the compiler contends that this weaker Grecia in Daniel 2 is a symbol of Russia, and that following the Grecian victory, 10 kings will lead to the rise of Alexander the Great. In other words, the crisis at midnight resulting from Russian ascendancy and other things, and the sudden shift in the balance of power which will have been created, will lead the 10 kings to come together to begin the work of elevating Donald Trump to the leadership of the United Nations. With this in mind, it would
Wait a second, we got a couple hands.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Not a problem.
I have a thought on this. Earlier, he's saying that basically there was a Darius that was the last leadership of the Persian that actually anointed Alexander the Great as rulership over Persia, right?
Maybe.
Isn't that what he said earlier?
He said it, but he wasn't sure it even happened.
Okay, I just want to point out something similar because Darius was the first ruler of Persia, and it seems like the last ruler of Persia was also Darius.
Yes, it was.
And so we're looking at Russia now. The first ruler of Russia
Putin.
was
Vladimir.
Vladimir, and we also seeing Vladimir at the end, and maybe we can see that Vladimir is going to anoint Trump as being a ruler over the realm of Russia. Do you see what I'm saying? Possibility? Question mark?
I don't know. Go ahead.
I forgot to say it, it just popped into my mind, so I'm going back a little bit, sorry. But Xerxes' name means hero among the rulers, which is really neat because it typifies the United States, obviously, but France was the firstborn of the Catholic Church, but it also had the name of, later during the Holy Roman Empire, Charlemagne had the title, and he was French, had the title of first among equals, which is a really neat one because he was the first among the equal 10 nations that were the Holy Roman Empire, or the 7, I guess.
He
at
was
that
the first among rulers.
he was the he was the hero among the rulers. He was the first one among all the other rulers. So it's the same name you see that's been carried through, which is neat. But that's a side thought.
So, you're saying the first Persian king,
Was Darius?
and the last was Darius,
What-
but then you're jumping to Russia
No, no.
and saying Vladimir.
He's saying that basically, what he's saying? He's saying that the Greece, Rome, are first.
Persia, though, is the United States.
Right.
Greece
okay.
is Russia.
Okay, so I guess I can't really. But just the fact that there is the first one is Darius, the last one is Darius. Darius acknowledges
Beginning and end.
Alexander the Great that he's going to be taking over now Persia, and then it's interesting that you have the first ruler of Russia that represented the king of the north had the same name as that today. There's a
South.
Huh?
South.
So,
King of South.
you said,
No, I didn't say no.
Yep, you did. It's recorded. Don't argue, we got it recorded.
Well, I didn't mean to say that.
Yes, we do. Brother Tyler.
It's skipping my mind right now. But what were the two brothers of Rome who started Rome?
Romulus.
Romulus and Remus.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what it was. So Romulus kills his brother Remus. Not important to the story, but Romulus is supposedly the first ruler of Rome or the founder of
Yeah.
Rome. The last emperor of Rome is Romulus something. He gets taken out during the time of the Heruli. So you see the beginning and the end of the two Romuluses. Again, not necessarily germane.
But interesting.
Interesting.
There was a hand over here. Okay, so who was reading? And where are you? You're on page 6?
With this in mind, it would be well to note that one of the primary causes of the Ionian revolt in the time of Darius Hystaspes, which then concluded in the Greco-Persian battles between Xerxes and Themistocles, was the fact that Cyrus the Great had subjugated the Greeks and placed them under tyrants. Cyrus the Great typifies Bush the Great, and he subjugated not the literal Greeks, but the Soviets. Thus, we see another evidence that Grecia has a prophetic connection to Russia, and the Ionian revolt in the time of Darius could possibly be referring to the Russian aggression which began in the days of Barack Obama Darius. Secular journalists mark a key event in the development of this state of affairs at the annexation of the Crimean Peninsula to the Russian Federation via Vladimir Putin. Since then, we have also seen other signs of Russian aggression, such as the intervention in the Syrian war in September of 2015. These Russian actions led the Obama administration to respond by sending heavy military presence into Europe and the Middle East and imposing sanctions on the Russians. Thus, we probably see a repeat of Darius's invasion of Grecia, which is concluded in the time of Xerxes, Donald Trump. To strengthen these submissions, the compiler will now parallel Daniel 11:1-4 with the recently unsealed prophetic line of Daniel 11 verses 10-16.
Daniel 11:10-16, historical and prophetic. But his sons shall be stirred up, and shall assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come, and overflow, and pass through. Then shall he return, and be stirred up, even to his fortress. And the king of the south shall be moved with choler, and shall come forth and fight with him, even the king of the north. And he shall set forth a great multitude. But the multitude shall be given into his hand. And when he hath taken away the multitude, his heart shall be lifted up, and he shall cast down many 10,000s, but he shall not be strengthened by it. For the king of the north shall return, and shall set forth a multitude greater than the former, and shall certainly come after certain years with a great army and with much riches. And in those times there shall many stand up against the king of the south. Also the robbers of thy people shall exalt themselves to establish the vision, but they shall fall. So the king of the north shall come, and cast up a mount, and take the most fenced cities. And the arms of the south shall not withstand, neither his chosen people, neither shall there be any strength to withstand. But he shall come against him, shall do according to his own will, and none shall stand before him, and he shall stand in the glorious land, which by his hand shall be consumed. Daniel 11, 10 through 16.
Okay. Now he's got another line. And how do we want to... We already kind of got this going on up here. This is his line on the top, if we make this a line. Military and economic buildup. He's connecting here on this line, and he's got Phoenicia, $218, 1989. Raphia moved with Kohler. King of the South wins. King of the North wipes out. King of South. And 63, this would be 63 BC, 198 BC, and 217 BC. Glorious land. Jerusalem's walls breached. Right? That's it. That one. I just don't have the kings on it. Serenus. Reagan Bush is here, he has up here, but up here he has, because he's got another history going on, Serenus and Magnus. Okay.
The compiler considers Daniel 11, 10 through 16, and Daniel 11, 1 through 4 as two strongly connected parallel lines of prophetic history. This is for the purpose of establishing the similarities among them. The connections between the two lines are actually the fundamental bedrock of the contentions in this document. The two sons of Seleucus Callinicus brought to view in Daniel 11:10, Seleucus Cyrenius and Antiochus Magnus, typify Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush, respectively. The two sons of the northern kingdom recaptured territory which was previously theirs, and the foregoing U.S. presidents were both involved in the process of reclaiming territory for the papacy in fulfillment of Daniel 11:40b. Antiochus sought to take advantage of this chaotic situation after an invasion in 221 BC failed to launch. He finally began the Fourth Syrian War in 219 BC. He recaptured
Seleucus, Pieria, as well as cities in Phoenicia, amongst them Tyre. Rather than promptly invading Egypt, Antiochus waited in Phoenicia for over a year, consolidating his new territories and listening to diplomatic proposals from the Ptolemaic kingdom. Meanwhile, Ptolemy's ministers, Sosispia, Bias, began recruiting and training an army. He recruited not only from the local Greek population, as Hellenistic armies generally were, but also from the native Egyptians, enrolling at least 30,000 natives as Valenites. This innovation paid off, but it would eventually have dire consequences for Ptolemaic stability. In the summer of 217 BC, Ptolemy engaged and defeated the long-delayed Antiochus in the Battle of Raphia, the largest battle since the Battle of Ipsus over 80 years earlier. These presidents also typified by Darius the Mede and Cyrus the Great in Daniel 11, 1-4. Darius would correspond with Seleucus, Cyrenius, both of which typify Ronald Reagan, and Cyrus the Great would correspond with Antiochus Magnus the Great, both of which typify Bush the Great.
That's up here with these two lines.
Right. Thus, we can see a purposeful connection between these two lines, but in place by inspiration. Put in place by inspiration. In Daniel 11, 1-4, we see the fourth king engaged in a military and economic buildup in advance of a battle against the realm of Grecia. In Daniel 11:11, we also see the king of the north, Antiochus Magnus, setting forth a great multitude in advance of the battle of Raphia. The above Wikipedia reference identifies this military consolidation as transpiring after territory was reclaimed in 219, but before the Battle of Raphia in 217. Therefore, the compiler speculates that seeing that it took over a year to consolidate his new territories, the great multitude is prepared sometime within the year 218. At the end of the world, this consolidation and the work of strategizing for a conflict by listening to the diplomatic proposals of the king of the south would have to take place sometime between 1989, 219 BC, when territory was reclaimed, and midnight, 217 BC, when Raphia is repeated. This is a second witness to the fact that there is some significant military preparations by both Trump and Putin, and some significant application of Trump's direct treaty and alliance political model before midnight. The compiler suggests that these pre-midnight military and economic changes are a subject of Bible prophecy and are significant enough to demand our special attention as we approach midnight.
And that's happening. Trump's already pushing to build up the economy and the military. Go ahead.
You see it with Russia too. They're coming out with all these new weapons and things like that that they didn't have previously in previous years. Mm-hmm. It's a mini Cold War in terms of, or I guess just the same in terms of the buildup of weaponry. But this time they have a lot better things than they did last time.
And then you have cyber warfare as part of the game too, on both sides. Okay, that fits. Yeah?
I don't know if he explains it or not, but Thermopylae, the stalemate for, I think it's 480, right after Phoenicia, before midnight, is an interesting waymark. I'm not sure if he ever explains it, because I know he has a question mark in here about it, but actually on his line he has a question mark, so I don't know what that is, but that would be interesting to know if there's some sort of engagement before.
That's question mark.
Yeah, both. Yeah.
I would suggest that this has got to be something about the prediction before midnight. It's got to connect in there somewhere, because that's the waymark that's now being Lord's building this waymark. If you remember that this would be the 5 of the 30. 9/11 has 30, and you got 5 in between marking the prediction before midnight. This has got to be somewhere close to it. Maybe the stalemate's what's going on in Syria right now, getting ready to go on where they're, who knows? The Bible knows.
The results of both engagements in Daniel 11:2 and Daniel 11:11 and 12 were identical. The power with the greater multitude was humiliated and unexpectedly defeated. This is a connection which cannot be ignored.
Do you agree with that?
Yes.
That it's a connection that cannot be ignored when it's in the very same prophecy, in the very same chapter? No way it can be ignored.
Therefore, the compiler thus contends that the Grecian victory over Xerxes' army typified the king of the South's victory over Magnus's army, both of which in turn typify Russia's surprise victory and ascendancy over the forces of the United States at midnight.
So you got 2 witnesses in Daniel 11 that are proving the perfect fulfillment. Right? 3 witnesses all totaled up. But upon the testimony of these 2 that he's putting together are typifying the battle at midnight.
Accordingly, the realm of Grecia in Daniel 11:2 would be Russia and its allies. In the line of Daniel 11:1 through 4, the compiler suggested that the mighty king begins to stand up at the midnight cry, and therefore we can mark the introduction of a new Grecian order at that waymark. It is also suggested that the corresponding waymark for this in the line of Daniel 11:10 through 16 is the Battle of Panium. In the former line, a new Grecian order is rising in the latter reign. In the latter line, Ptolemaic Egypt, a division of Greece, is falling. The contention is that these 2 events are to be understood together, and they teach the truth that as Russia ceases to be the king of the South in Bible prophecy at the midnight cry, or Panium, the United Nation begins to rise as the new dragon power at the same waymark. This confirms the principle set forth by the French Revolution in 1793, that at the beginning of the King of the South, in the end-time Bible prophecy, there is a kingdom removed, ancient regime of France, and a new manifestation of the dragon power, a communistic government. So at the end of the King of the South, we would expect a kingdom removed, Russia, and simultaneously a new manifestation of the dragon power, the United Nations. Thus is seen a strong connection between the lines of Daniel 11:1 through 4 and Daniel 11:10 through 16.
Daniel, you can read another one if you want.
Daniel 11:4 then identifies the breaking and dividing of Alexander's kingdom and the internal strife which resulted. This has its counterpart in Daniel 11:16. For when Pompey entered Judea, it was racked with internal strife and civil war. And both these verses prefigure the strife and bloodshed that will be witnessed in the United States at the Sunday Law. Therefore, if both lines have strong connections for 1989, the Midnight Cry, and the Sunday Law, it follows that there must be a strong connection between the 2 lines for the waymark of midnight. The victory over the Grecian states...
The victory of
the Grecian states at Salamis and Sparta, and the victory of Ptolemaic Egypt at Raphia should point to the victory of Russia over the United States at midnight. Another line to put in place for the contention that the Grecia of Daniel 11:2 is Russia is Daniel 11:23 through 29 in conjunction with Daniel 11:16.
Okay. This would be, that's not a very dark one, is it? Not a very straight line either. Okay, so midnight is here. 161/158. Roman bad. Roman-Jewish treaty. Midnight. And Paneum here. Actium. 360 to the Sunday law. These are things we've already established. 31 BC, 330 AD. Kingdom divided. So he's putting the third line in there from Daniel 11, right? The League of the Jews with the Romans has been placed at midnight, typifying the union that apostate Adventism enters into with the United States government at midnight. The reason for the historical union was the Syrian oppression the Jews were experiencing. Syrian oppression at midnight has its counterpart in Ptolemaic Egypt's oppression of the Jews following Philopator's surprise victory over the king of the north, Daniel 11, 11 and 12. Thus, line upon line, Syria would symbolize Russia. Secondly, Syria was the first of three obstacles that pagan Rome had to conquer to rule the world supremely, according to Daniel 8, 9. And the first of these three obstacles to be dealt with by modern Rome is the king of the south, Russia. This becomes important for the application of Daniel 11:16. Following this is identified the managing of Rome's affair from its strongholds for a time. This typifies the Trump administration's misuse of the Constitution to establish an autocratic government, dictatorship. Yep. An interesting grammatical argument in verse 24 is the fact that the verse says, "He shall forecast his devices against the strongholds even for a time." Thus showing that Trump administration's devices or plans and policies will be against or in opposition to the U.S. Constitution, because that's their stronghold. The time appointed of verse 29 is the Sunday law, but historically it was 330 AD. In that year, Constantine the Great abandoned the city of Rome as a capital, and the kingdom was divided into east and west. This is a counterpart to the dividing of the kingdom of Alexander in Daniel 11:4, both of which represent the Sunday law when the United States is brought to national ruin for enforcing Sunday observance and abandoning its constitution. Having delineated these events, the compiler will now proceed to show how Daniel 11:16 is a line unto itself, which confirms the truth of the other lines of Daniel 11 and further strengthens the concept that Grecia or Greece can represent Russia. Sister Kathy?
Daniel 11:16, the Roman Republic. But he that cometh against him shall do according to his own will, and none shall stand before him, and he shall stand in the glorious land, by which his hand shall be consumed. Daniel 11:16 is a summary of over 100 years of history concerning the progressive rise of Rome. This particular verse deals with the activities of Rome in its existence as the Roman Republic. This fact has opened up further considerations concerning the end-time application of Daniel 11:16. Arguably, the first significant victory for Rome in its campaign against the Grecian Empire was the Battle of Pydna, 168 BC, in which it defeated Macedonia and took over its territories. Based on previous prophetic history, see Daniel 11:5, Macedonia was part of the territory of the Seleucid Empire. Therefore, Rome's first significant step in overthrowing the Seleucid Empire was a capturing of some of the territory of that empire. The decisive blow was to be struck in 65 BC, when Rome would conquer the capital of the Seleucid Empire, Syria. Thus we see that Rome's first obstacle was conquered in 2 steps. First, some of the territory, then the capital. This is in turn typifying modern Rome's 2-step conquest of its first obstacle, the King of the South. First it was the territory, the Soviet states, then it will be the capital, Russia. The Battle of Pydna would therefore line up with 1989 and the conquest of Syria with the Midnight Cry. This is further evidence that Syria, which oppressed the Jews leading to the Roman-Jewish treaty of Daniel 11:23, can represent Russia. These considerations show that, depending on the context, Russia can be represented by the Ptolemaic Empire or the Seleucid Empire. These were the 2 divisions of the Grecian kingdom. Therefore, even at this level, Russia can be represented by Grecia.
That's pretty good logic, but I've ran out of room on the board, and we're never going to get through these 24 pages today. Are you very good at putting lines on the board like some people do, nice and straight and neat and clean? Yes or no? You can get a ruler, but before tomorrow, if anyone in here has that talent, this line here on page 10, it should go over the top here, maybe in a different color. Antonesia's good? Is that why you're pointing to her? This line here on page 10, I would think should go up here. Okay, and line it up, do it nice and neat. And so when we come back in tomorrow, we'll never get through all this today anyway. That can be in place. But this seems to be fitting together like, reading it today, I've read this a couple times before, several weeks ago, and I thought it was good, but it wasn't all clicking for me. Maybe it's things that have settled into place in our understanding since then. But this is clicking. We still haven't got into the tricky part. Will be Daniel 8, okay? We haven't got there yet, but in terms of Daniel 11, this is seeming to... So you understand the job assignment, my sister, for tomorrow morning? Okay. Then I won't worry about trying to put this other line up there today.
Well, I'd like to point out that we have 10 and 10 from between Midnight Cry and Sunday Law. We have 2 10s there. But if we look on our line, we know that it took the 10 years of Afghanistan war, and the Afghanistan war took 10 years.
Yeah, they'll bring you to here. 79 to 89, 10 years. This is this conquering of the king of the south in this history is going to have to be repeated when it fully gets conquered at the Midnight Cry. There's going to be a similar history because Jesus illustrates the end from the beginning, so you've got 10 in there.
But I also want to point out that when Reagan began to reign in 1981, the one thing that he wanted to do was basically to conquer or to take down communism. So from 1981 to 1991, it took the period of conquering the body of the King of the South, dissembling USSR. So you have another 10 there, and that 10 years too there too.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering, I can't remember. Was it in 1991 that George Bush the first said we now have a new world order? Or was that 89? Be nice if it was 91 along with your theory, because you'd put this 10 years right here and the new world order is right here. But I don't remember. It seems like it was 1991 that George Bush the first said that, but it could be 1989.
In 1981, when wasn't he was the vice president of Reagan?
Who was?
Bush.
Yeah, Bush the first was the vice president of Reagan, but he became the president after Reagan.
Right.
And it's it's in this history here that he says we've now entered into a new world order or something like that.
Bush doesn't come president until 1989.
Yeah, but he,
So
that's
it would
when
have
he
to be in
says
that
it.
history.
When he's a
It would have to
president,
be
he
in that
says it.
history. Yeah.
91.
1991. So the point is if what she's saying is 81 is 81 is when Ronald Reagan signed in. He was inaugurated as president. Okay, and the if you mark the conclusion of the battle with the King of the South in 1991 in terms of George Bush now saying we've now entered a new world order, then you have a 10-year period from 1981 to 1991 that would plug in here the end of the King of the South. Okay, because this is the War of the King of the South, and the beginning of the war against the King of the South is going to typify the end of the war. So if you have a 10-year period, then right here, initially you had George Bush the first saying we've now entered into a new world order, and this is right where the new world order begins to raise its ugly head. It's just
Kind of like the Catholic Church as far as getting a deadly wound, and it was kind of like when they took all those states away from them. That's why it was so quiet for so long. It was like a deadly wound. Now it's being healed, and now it's coming back. It's not the same, but it is similar as far as it was wiped out, and now
Similar
it's coming
behavior.
back. Yeah, and it was quiet for so long.
Tyler?
It was mentioned a couple times. One was in 91, but also I think the first one, the one we're talking about, was in 90. Interesting enough, it was September 11th.
Oh, really?
September 11th
Oh, wow.
of 1990 is when he said it the first time?
But apparently he mentioned it a couple times in that, over the
Okay, well that wrecked our
September
theory
11th,
about
1990.
1981, 1991.
Yeah.
But that's all right. Let's who read last? Me? No? Kathy. Just a second. Tyler has.
Wouldn't, I know you want to move on, but wouldn't the 10 years before 1989 be before midnight? Because if midnight is representing this decisive blow, but the reversal of that, I guess, preceded by a proxy war and all of that, wouldn't that be midnight and you'd have 10 years before that? And not in midnight cry area?
Yeah, that's what I hope I've been pointing to. I've been pointing. This is the midnight cry, and this is the end of the King of the South. Okay, so the war against the King of the South begins in 1989 prophetically, but there was a 10-year proxy war that preceded it. So if the beginning of this prophecy is going to illustrate the end, and this is the end of the King of the South, you're going to have 10 years before, a 10-year proxy war.
I guess you could look at it that way, but my point is 1989, the way we've been illustrating it, is midnight.
1989 is midnight.
That this is like we have the proxy war before 1989, the 10 years war in Afghanistan, then we have this war in Syria,
So it
it's all
must
right
be.
there. That's the way I've understood it, but maybe that's not true.
No, I've heard people saying that, but and maybe that's correct because midnight's going to have the same characteristics as the midnight cry. But I've been approaching it as this is the end of the King of the South, based upon 1793.
Yeah, I get that connection.
So maybe it's both because there's a doubling in here.
What I found is that George Bush Sr. New World Order live speech September 11, 1991 on YouTube.
Yeah, I saw that one too, but you have to actually look at some of the references around it. There's just that one video. If you scroll up and scroll down.
So is there a difference between if it's spoken or if it's written? When was it first spoken?
On September 11th, 1990.
90?
90. He says it twice. That's what I'm saying. He
Oh,
says
so
it.
you have September 11, 1990 and September 11, 1991. You have a doubling.
You have to dig that.
Where you
It
gotta
seems
judge
like
that.
it seems like a typo by the historians. Dig it out and make sure that it was said twice, both on September 11th, 1 year apart. If that's the case, then there's something profound there. Sister Kathy, would you read that paragraph you read one more time? This is getting kind of complex now, but it's worth getting in our head.
Daniel 11:16 is a summary of over 100 years of history concerning the progressive rise of Rome. This particular verse deals with the activities of Rome in its existence as the Roman Republic. This fact has opened up further considerations concerning the end-time application of Daniel 11:16. Arguably, the first significant victory for Rome in its campaign against the Grecian Empire was the Battle of Pydna, 168 BC, in which it defeated Macedonia and took over its territories. Based on previous prophetic history, see Daniel 11:5, Macedonia was part of the territory of the Seleucid Empire. Therefore, Rome's first significant step in overthrowing the Seleucid Empire was a capturing of some of the territory of that empire. The decisive blow was to be struck in 65 BC, when Rome would conquer the capital of the Seleucid Empire, Syria. Thus we see that Rome's first obstacle was conquered in 2 steps. First, some of the territory, then the capital. This is in turn typifying modern Rome's 2-step conquest of its first obstacle, the King of the South. First it was the territory, the Soviet states, then it will be the capital, Russia. The Battle of Pydna would therefore line up with 1989 and the conquest of Syria with the Midnight Cry. This is further evidence that Syria, which oppressed the Jews leading to the Roman-Jewish Treaty of Daniel 11:23, can represent Russia. These considerations show, depending on the context, Russia can be represented by the Ptolemaic Empire or the Seleucid Empire. These were the 2 divisions of the Grecian kingdom. Therefore, even at this level, Russia can be represented by Greece.
Okay, there's some people that are watching this class on a regular basis, and they're at least raising the question, why are we saying Russia is the king of the South? Shouldn't it be North Korea? North Korea is the underdog that is going to defeat the United States at the Battle of Raphia. Or why aren't we saying China? And my argument has been with them all the way through is it's Christendom. But their argument is that Russia is no longer communist. And my response to him now is, read this paragraph a couple times. This is a very strong case for a 2-step conquering of the King of the South that corresponds with verse 10 of Daniel 11, that it goes up to the neck, but it leaves the capital. A 2-step conquering. This is becoming more and more sound, and it eliminates, my friend, this argument about North Korea, which seemed a little bit weak anyway.
Vladimir Putin was a very important part in the USSR. He actually was a part of the secret police.
Yeah.
So we actually have a strong element from the old history, all the old USSR in place right now ruling the new Russia. So for us to discard that information that Russia no longer has any communism in them, it would be foolishness, because basically this man had brought with him, just like when Romania went down, communism went down, but how long did it take for the communistic mentality go down? It's still there present even today.
But his argument is that they're having elections in Russia, and technically a communist system rules from the Politburo in Russia. It's a group of men, they don't worry about no elections. So they've got this election process now, so it turned it into a democracy. And I would go to the history of the KGB that you're referring to, where they had a plan in place to lower the West's concern against them by pretending to come into the community of nations until they were all not looking the other way, and then they were going to strike.
The way they're doing it on the surface, it looks like it's still that it's a democratic, but it's really behind scene. Everything is planned out. So basically, they're making things happening exactly the way they want to, but on the surface, it looks like that basically the people are having a choice, but that's not so.
If anyone is a political threat to Putin, he either poisons them with radiation or he arrests them and throws them in jail. That's not really pure democracy.
I want to point out something that on the 1843 chart, we have the 158 BC. And on the 1850 chart, we have the 158 BC, but we also have the 168 BC, which mark a 10-year period also. And he's basically talking about the 168 BC bit now, where basically the Romans have conquered the Greece. And that's where it's marked that basically the Roman Empire is taking over the Greece Empire. And then the 158, that's where William Miller had pointed out the League
with the Jews.
The League with the Jews. So we have a 10-year mark there too, but I don't know what that means in light of this.
Next paragraph.
But another point worth noting in this consideration is the fact that between the history of 168 BC and 65 BC, there are 4 prominent leaders of the Roman Republic.
Okay, we'll stop here because he's going to bring up another line of thought. He's going to say in that history there are 4 Roman leaders, and we've dealt with 4 Persian leaders in the beginning of Daniel 11. And then we've dealt with 4 Roman leaders in Daniel 11, beginning with Pompey all the way down to Tiberius. But now he's going to show that in this history of 168 to 65, there are once again 4 Roman powers, and he's going to treat them prophetically. So that's too big to finish up in 7 minutes.
Make sure you guys bring your notes down.
We'll be working through these. For me, I'm thinking I may be leaving here on Tuesday. So it's at that point that Tyler will continue on. And I have a hunch we'll be working on this all the way through Tuesday. Okay. Sister Kathy P., you want to have a closing prayer?
Kind, loving Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity that we have, each one of us, to be here and to read these lines of truth that you are revealing to your people that want to see. Help us, Heavenly Father, to be willing to see them and to apply them into our lives, and help us to realize just how close we are, that we may be prepared in that time. Give each one of us a desire to take apart these things on our own time and that we may make it our own. Help us, Heavenly Father, as we're weak vessels. Strengthen us. In Jesus' name. Amen.